Okay, so let's start moving into a little bit more complicated flies. We're going to start tying things that are a little more complicated from here on out. The hook I have in a vise is a size 6. You can tie this on a 6, a 4, or an 8. I should have just said 4, 6, 8, but I kind of jumped all over the place. This paddle will be pretty hard to tie. The full body with the dropper loop on something smaller, it'll just be a lot to pack on there. Now you can tie the version without the dropper loop where it's not the full body. You probably get that down to a 12 if you're good at it, or you get good at it. So pretty much like the rest of these flies we're doing this session, let's get that vise out of the way and let's talk about our foam. So what we have here are pre-made mono eyes. Now you can make your own eyes out of 40 or 50 pound test mono just by taking a lighter to it. If you want to try this, if I have a, yeah I do. If you want to try this, you just kind of take this and gently burn it until it balls up, and then you can color it black. And so you can make your own. If you've never tried that, go for it. We're going to stay off of that right now, and we're just going to go with the pre-made mono eyes. These are a size large, and the reason I'm going with the pre-made mono eyes is because it's going to let us determine our body and the foam we need a little bit easier. So what we're looking to do is actually, whoop, I thought I had it, didn't look good on camera though. So we want our foam to sit neatly between the eyes like this so that we get an eye actually popping out on both sides. Otherwise you'll have to kind of cut it down and stuff, and it can look kind of funny. The actual measurement on this, let me double check. I got my ruler here, but I believe I cut that at a 1/4 inch. Yeah, it's well, let me try again. Let me just actually pick it up here. There we go. It's a little, I can't do this with, there's too much stuff in front of me. Yeah, so I'm like right at a 1/4 inch there. Okay, so we got that. You're gonna need some pearl cord. It just happened to be sitting there. You don't need it just yet, but just so you know, you'll need some of that. And the mono eyes and the monofilament. What we're gonna do first is make some rubber legs. Now there's different ways to do this. We're gonna do this a real easy way. We're gonna expand on rubber legs next week by combining 2 colors. This week we're just gonna stick with 1. So if you know how to do 2 color, use 2 colors tying in rubber, that's fine. You can go ahead and do that. We're gonna do things a little bit differently this time. Just kind of ease us into it. So I'm gonna actually pull 2. If you can see that, I got 2 there. I'm gonna pull 2 off. And I'm just going to form a loop and pull it through, just kind of like you're tying your shoe, and just gently pull a knot into it so that if I can grab it there, so it just sits like that. And we want to do the same thing to the other side. Just form a loop. Don't over tighten right now. You can see how that knot is nice and big. That'll help with sizing these in a second, so you don't have to trim them down quite so much. And then when you fold them together, you just want to see if they're about the same size. And these ones they're pretty close. So you can see I either need to pull this one longer or this one shorter. So I'll just pull this one shorter a little bit and try again. And you can always cut these. There you go. That tighten them up. Now you just grab both and tighten. And they should be the same size. Now what I want to do here is just cut that loop right in the middle, creating 2 sets of rubber legs. Now the long side is going to go along the side of the body, and the back side of the knot is going to go down and out. So just kind of keep that in mind. You want to have one side a little bit longer because we're going to actually use this whole piece to create the front legs and back legs all in one go. Now, what a lot of people will like to do is just take these and right on that knot, and hold it with my fingers, just get a little bit of super glue on it. I honestly typically don't super glue rubber too much. Some rubber glues can weaken the the rubber. And so I try to avoid that a little bit. But anyway, for this one we kind of need the super glue. I use crazy glue and a brush, and it seems to do okay. But I have used some that have just made it super brittle. Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm just trying to get some stuff lined back out. Okay, let's get the vise into play. So this would be a good time to pause it if you need to catch up and do some of those things. All right, so again, I have a size 6 streamer hook in the vise. The foam here will be more than enough to keep this bug afloat, along with the hair and everything. And I'm going to be using uni thread 80 in black. Now ideally you wouldn't want to use black. Ideally you would want to use green or something like that. So we're going to overdub a little bit just to hide the black. But if you use just like a regular green thread or something like that, you wouldn't have to necessarily take that step. So what we want to do is we want to start our thread. I'm going to be working the whole body and putting in the loop. So if you don't want to put in the loop to drop a nymph off the back, you can avoid this whole step until we actually just tie the thread on and start the purl cord. Or well, I guess we're not going to tie them, we'll already be on, but until we start the purl cord. The purl cord is going to start right about here, about halfway. So if you want to not add the loop, which is obviously an extra step, you just start your thread up front, a couple bodkin wisps behind the eye, right in here, and then just work back just slightly past the halfway point. But since we're going to add the cord, or the mono, we're going to start halfway. We're just going to tie this thread on. And I'm just going to work this back. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's going to be dubbed. You do want to have it somewhat touching, just so that we can get a good base of super glue down and have everything bind together. So we want to go back to about the barb, and then we're going to come back forward. Excuse me. So for the dropper loop, we're going to add, I think this here is, what is this, 40 pound? 50 pound test. And I'm just going to start this right up front. Let's see if I can turn this to the side so you can see. I'm just going to start this right in line with my thread. And I'm going to have it off slightly to the side of the top. So you may have to tie it in up top and take your nail and shift it over. Basically so that the center part of the top of the back is exposed. And the reason we're going to do this is because we're going to fold this back over. We want both pieces of that mono to basically sit directly on top of the shank. You'll see it in a second. I can't do it very well on its side. So you want to try to hold this still. Bring this back. Okay. Now, if you're not comfortable doing this, you can just kind of line these up, put a few wraps in, and start to pull until you get to the distance that you want. Your thread's going to want to move forward doing it this way, but if you, for whatever reason, if you don't feel comfortable making a small loop and then wrapping in the way I'm going to, that's an option for you. So what I want to do is I want to get this loop, I have to kind of form it there. I want to get this loop so that it hangs just out past the bend. You don't want to go too far, but you do want to have it off the bend. And so right about there is good. I'm about 1/8 of an inch past the bend. And then once you have it and you're pinching it in place, at the tip, just gently pinch. And that's going to help form that mono into a tighter loop, and it's not going to want to pop open on you quite so much as we tie it in. Okay, I need to get rid of some of this. I got too much. If you're going to cut that off, doing it this way, then cut it off where you can save the rest of it and use it for another mono loop. So I've just got 2 or 3 thread wraps over, and we want to just kind of keep it situated so it's sitting on top like so. And then what I like to do is I'll actually come through and put a few wraps in underneath and then start my tying in process coming down. You don't have to be super tight on this coming down, just so that you basically have something that looks like this. That's actually just fine. What that allows us to do is it gives us a little bit of room for adjustment. See, now you can kind of pop this back open a little bit if you want. And then two, it allows us to put a nice base of super glue down on everything to make sure that this doesn't come out. And now I want to start just wrapping this thread, basically touching turns nice and tight until I get to the back, creating this back half underbody. And then what we're doing here, excuse me, you can actually do, you can do the same procedure on other flies as well that we've tied this session. I just have kind of held off a little ways until the halfway point, because each week we add a few extra things, and but I know this is one that people want to get involved with. So what we need to do here is get some ice dub. If you got a material kit, you're going to find a small bag of dubbing. Believe it or not, that little tiny bag actually holds a half a bag of dubbing. I ran out of the bigger bags. But you don't need much here, because all we're going to do is just cover up this back end. And it really just doesn't take very much. And with that super glue still being wet, it should be, or starting to dry slowly. It's going to help lock all this into place fairly well. And so we just start working it. Like with most ice dubs and everything else, you know, a couple turns, twist, couple turns, twist, put your finger in place, hold it down, that kind of thing, until you get it where you're going. And we just want to cover this up the full way until we're at the end of the mono. Kind of like so. If you don't like all the extras hanging off, now's the time that you want to groom it. And also, just so our thread doesn't start popping all around, put in a couple half hitches or a couple whip finishes. Just pull that to the back. I was half tempted to pull off or snap my thread there. I'm kind of used to doing that sometimes. Okay, so next what we need is the pearl cord. Now, this is a variation of the double D hopper. So if you don't want this back end, that's fine. You'll start tying here a couple bodkin wisps behind the eye, right in this area, and you're going to wrap back just to about the halfway point. And then you're going to pick up from here with the pearl cord. I'm just going to slide this pearl cord underneath, making sure that it's even on both sides. Pretty close. I'm just going to tie it in just like this on top of that hook shank. Well, 4 to 6 good solid turns. Excuse me, my throat has been super dry today. Let me get a quick drink of water there. And we're going to do something very similar like we did with this mono out back. We're going to angle this pearl cord just slightly off to the far side of the hook shank. Now I'm going to pull this other side around, and if you can see, you'll see this here. As you do that, it's going to kind of almost create like an S, like this, with this little nub being left out front. What we're going to do is just fold this over and tie that nub in. Oop. You want to do it on the top. Obviously, don't twist your vise. I'm just trying to show you, so that you've got this little nub sitting there. You want to tie this in real good so it doesn't move, but so that both pieces just kind of sit center off the back. Next, what we want to do is just lift this straight up, and with our fingers, I guess you can do it out back too. I'll do it out back so you can kind of see my fingers. I'm just going to take it and twist it and rotate it. You want to pull somewhat tight when you do this, so that way when you fold it over, it's going to twist together like so. And we want this to be just past our mono loop, or just 1/4 inch past the bend. I think I forgot to say how much I cut off here was 5 inches. And that's real perfect for this fly, is 5 inches. If you can tie each strand down one by one, it will provide a better hold. So having a little bit extra and wasting half an inch or so is really not a big deal. Okay. Like most things this session, it's super glue heavy, so I'll just go ahead and kind of wipe some glue on there at random and tie this in. If you get good at these, you can tie. They're actually not. The techniques are kind of different than a lot of people have worked with, but if you get good at it, they don't take too long to tie, especially if you're tying the short version without the dropper loop. Okay. So next, what we want to do is get our foam. Oh, I'm sorry. No. I set it in the wrong order. I set my materials in order and I put my foam in the wrong place. And so what we want to do is we want to get our crystal flash. This is going to be our underwing. The underwing is optional, but it's recommended just because the foam is going to get cut short, or is slender rather. So I've got 3 strands that I'm just doubling up on itself over and over. I'm just going to slide this up underneath my thread. Put a few wraps to tie it in. You can adjust the length if you need to. We want this underwing to sit just kind of, you don't want it going past the body too much, let's put it that way. You don't want it short, you don't want it long, you just kind of want it kind of right in here. Having it cut to different lengths and taper, that's totally fine. Just going to fold it back over on itself and put a few wraps in like so. But you want to try to get it to where it sits right on top. We're pretty close. We can actually fix some of this here in a minute. This guy is pretty far off, so we'll get rid of him. So is this one. If you got some that are really wild, just go ahead and get rid of them now. They probably won't work for you in a minute. Next, I'm going to move over to elk rump. The reason we're using elk rump here is just because the hairs are so much longer. If you get some really long deer hair, you can do that too. That'll work. But you're going to want to get a decent clump, because it's going to get thinned down quite a bit. And so here's what I originally cut off, and people say, how do you gauge that? Well, if you take it and you twist until you get it like this, and you line it up against your gap in your hook, you'll start to get a feel for how much hair you have there. And so what we're looking for is the tips to be just a little bit longer than the crystal flash and just a little bit longer than the body. And so once you kind of got a good feel for that, switch hands, no scissors, come in, and then we're going to trim off and leave about a 1/2 inch in front. I'm going to do that over the trash can though, save some mess. Or whatever it is you need to get it into your hair stacker if you have a hair stacker. Now, so before you put this in the hair stacker, pull out all these short hairs, just pinch the tips, pull. So this wing's going to actually get thinned down quite a bit. This hair doesn't need combing really, but I don't really see anything in there. There might be a little something. Yeah, not really. But then we can put it into a hair stacker and stack the tips. And so now I've got my tips stacked, and they don't have to be perfect, just close enough is good. we're going to get these orientated right on top of that crystal flash. I do try to collect this crystal flash a little bit. It doesn't always work out perfect, and try to set that right on top so that your hair is either right in line or just past your crystal flash, something like this. And now to tighten this in, or tie this in, I'm just gonna come over with a couple loop straps, pull up, make sure you've got everything centered on top of the hook before you move on, so it doesn't go too wonky on you. Now you can kind of let go and you'll see how it's kind of sitting on top. We're gonna use this technique again in week 6. Now I'm just gonna grab a few hairs, pull them back, put a wrap over, a few more from the front, put a wrap over, and I'm just gonna keep doing this until I've got them all tied in at different lengths. If you get good at cutting your hair short, where you're just holding it here and you trim off up front, that's fine too if you can do that. That's totally acceptable. But I know we have a lot of newer tires following us, and so I want to try to show some of these ways that may not be so complicated, and they'll still get the job done. Now we're going to trim this fairly short. And just to protect everything, we're just going to literally flop some glue on there. I'm running out of super glue on that one. And I'm going to work my thread back through, bringing it back into the back where the thread lines up there. And it's going to start to force everything down. You want to try to keep it on top because it does want to twist and turn depending on which way you wrap it. It'll shift either to the back or to the front. Grab everything and collect everything. Just lift up and place a few thread wraps underneath, and then another one on top. Now that's going to help keep it all kind of center lined. This is all going to go down once the foam's on. And we'll tie this in again. Okay, now we can grab our foam. So we're going to take this foam, and we want this foam to ride so that the tail is basically in line with the body. You can go a little bit past if you like. Most of the ones I've seen tied like this, the foam does not extend past the hair and the crystal flash. So what we're going to do to get our new dimensions is we're just going to place a couple of loose wraps over. Now we're going to do something kind of funny. We're going to actually take this foam and we're going to press it down. You want to try to get in the center on that eye and start to push over so that it forms a little indentation on the foam. Take your bodkin, get right in the middle of that foam, and push a hole through it. Now come back over that eye until you can gently force that foam through. With this being a little bit slender, a piece of foam, you do want to kind of take your time. Sometimes working it with a little, there you go, a little bodkin or something, so it kind of comes out like that. That's good. And now we can pull that back off. You just want to do that now. We're going to tighten this down here so that it doesn't move. And basically that should be the back half of the fly. If you got a few hairs sticking out and everything else, that's fine. It kind of helps shows downed grasshopper. So I'm going to go back to this. Now what I want to do is I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to fold a little bubble up underneath. That's going to give it the actual hopper head look. So we want to try to center this again, do the same thing. This can be a little bit of a challenge, especially if you're one of these crazy people like me that's got stuff in front of them. But you're going to do this kind of the same thing and get an indentation pretty close to the center, and we're going to do the exact same thing and just take our bodkin and push a hole through. Okay, now we got that down. Okay. Next, we're moving back to our dubbing. And again, we don't need a ton here. So I'm going to take my dubbing. And I'm just going to start dubbing this where I'll show you when I turn this back around. got a little ahead of myself there. I'm just gonna start dubbing this right up underneath the thread. You're gonna see a gap worth of stuff open back here. Don't worry about that yet. We're gonna take care of that here in a few minutes. You do wanna get tight to the foam, but if you see some thread coming through, that's okay. That's why I'd mentioned that ideally you'd have green foam, or whatever color you're tying this in, whether it's yellow or tan, you'd have that color foam there. And we're just gonna start to wrap this in coming forward. There will be a big drop off right here, and that's okay. And we wanna get until we're about 2 bodkin widths behind the eye so that we can actually do this with the foam, and then just this little bit of underbody is gonna be covered because that's what's gonna be exposed. So go ahead and tie this off. But if you do a few of these, especially if you've been tying for a while, I don't think it'll be as difficult as it looks. If you're newer to tying, this might be one of the tougher patterns you've ever tied. And that's okay if you don't get it perfect. That's why there's a shortened version of it, where you don't have to add all that back in and stuff. So at this point, I'm gonna put in a few whip finishes to make sure my thread doesn't slide around. Get out of there. Okay. Now, this time, I'm actually going to push that down and over. I'm going to hold it with my left thumb, left index, or your non-predominant hand. I'm going to bring my thread up from the bottom and over the top. And that's going to basically hide that thread wrap. You can swoop it directly around if you want it on the side. You can do that too. Both will be hidden in a minute. Okay, now here comes the tricky part, because now we got to put the eyes on. So if you have a little clip like this, a little small hair clip, you can grab everything and put it to the back. If you do not have one of those, something you can do is actually just take the foam and gently push it into the hook. And that'll help keep it out of the way. So now we need a set of eyes, the monofilament eyes. If you're going to burn your eyes, make sure you pre-burn them, because we just don't have a whole lot of room to work with here. So I'm going to kind of start this up and then just let it slide onto the hook. I'll do that again. So you can actually just hold this up above where you're actually going to tie it in, put a few loose wraps in so it captures, and then just let it slide down onto the hook. You don't want to do too many wraps right up front so that it seats right away, because you want to be able to adjust these eyes so that it sits neatly between the foam like that. That's why it was important that we cut it to the foam to the size of the eyes. And we're going to do some figure eights. And you're just going to sneak that thread behind the foam, out in front, down and around. If you've never worked with dumbbell eyes, I actually have a video on that that you can look at and watch, where I explain that a little bit, probably a little bit better than I do here. So what we're going to do here again is we're going to get to our foam, our super glue. We're going to wipe the glue pretty heavily on the foam underneath, all across the top of the eyes, and then back onto the other foam itself. Place a few more wraps in. Okay, now as this comes forward, our thread is coming up in. We're going to turn to the side so you can see up into the center, and then across, and then just behind. This is going to hide that extra thread wrap. Now we can push our new piece of, or our new hole in or through the eye. Push it on. And if you hold it a second, all that glue is going to hold that mouth in place so that it doesn't open up. So you may have to, I'm gonna keep moving, but you may have to hold this here for 30 seconds or so if you're using super glue. And that's gonna give a pretty, there he goes, it held. That's gonna give a pretty good looking grasshopper face. Like that. Okay. Let's move on to our legs. This part can get a little tricky. So we want our legs to obviously come out the back. You can really determine how much or little you want, or where you want it to bend and break, all that kind of thing. I'm just going to tie both of these in right about here. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to suck it into the side of the foam, like so, with a couple of wraps. So they're sitting like this. I'm going to do the same thing with the other side. So that they're sitting about the same. Okay, so we got that. Wouldn't be any fun if we didn't decide to add, not that you probably didn't really need one here, but this is a pretty big fly, but we're gonna add an indicator. I'm using this out of McFly foam. I'm gonna do the same thing we've done in the previous classes. I'm just gonna twist it together to kind of get that diameter small. Put about 3 or 4 wraps over. Actually, what you can do right here before you do this, I didn't think about it, just like before, if you do not like that black showing through, you can go ahead and dub right here. I'll just go ahead and do it just because I stopped and mentioned it. But yeah, you really don't need much here. Really, you really don't. Just a few, like a 1-2 turn kind of thing, or if you need help keeping your legs open. Either way is fine, whether you do it or not. Again, having the same colored thread would be very beneficial here. Okay, so now we'll add this foam indicator, or McFly foam indicator, I should say. Okay, I'm just going to leave that on there. Now as I come through and I come up and over, I'm going to lift this foam up. I'm just doing it upside down so you can kind of see. I'm going to bring it right on top of the old thread wraps, but this time I'm going to cross it over to the back, just like we did on a couple of the other patterns, to where it lines up with my original tie-in point. That's going to hide that extra thread wraps that you don't have any right here in the center. So once I'm here, you can do this one of two ways. You can pull your legs tight and make some wraps. Okay, I think that's a little bit more difficult. I actually like to bring the foam over first, work my thread around the foam to get just a couple of loose wraps in. I'm trying to turn to the side so you can see, but I'm actually going around my foam. Now I can tighten down. Now what I can do, I'll start on this side here, is I can actually angle my legs. I'm going to run them right along the side of the foam and pull them in. Ideally, I like to have them right in between, but whatever works. Again, this is a downed grasshopper, one that's just laying there dead on the water. That's what this is supposed to represent. And just to get this out of the way, grab it, twist, take my scissors, trim. Now I've got my little indicator. Again, probably totally not necessary on this pattern. This is an awfully big fly. If you tie it on a smaller one, maybe. And there really is not much more to do here, except we are going to go ahead and dub again just to cover that up. Again, I'm just going to emphasize one more time why using the same color thread would work really well right here. And I'm sure some of you are asking, why didn't you just use the same color thread? Well, because we only sent out one spool for the material kits, because thread has started to get rather expensive. So at the end of it, you should have a fly that looks about like this before you finish it. Now you're probably wondering, how in the heck are we gonna finish this? One of the best ways to do this actually is just with some super glue, wipe it on your thread. If you have a large whip finisher, you can put your thread wraps right over on top and the back. Actually, I'm just gonna kind of finish this the way I would a parachute, and just glue that thread, pull it nice and tight. Having a little bit of a black line there is not going to be a big deal. Just hold it there for a few seconds, and that's actually all that glue is going to hold this together. Just to be on the safe side, I'll do a couple of big half hitches with my fingers. You have to actually kind of open your fingers up. So basically, it's like a whip finish. You can finger whip this if you want, if you know how to do that. But the glue should be sufficient if you really layered it good with glue. Uh-oh, I got glue dried on part of my thread. It did. It's okay. It's covered. Trim that straggler out. Okay, now to finish the back wing, we're gonna come about halfway into the wing, trim that off. Now here you can leave it just like that, or you can trim out your corners like we've done on other flies, like so. Or if you wanted to, so I mean that's a good look. Or if you wanted to, you could actually try to run the whole thing. I'm trying to do this without cutting anything off that's important. Well, this is a funky angle. And you could just kind of run the whole thing down into like just a big triangle or pyramid type look. And so there you go. So this is again, this is a variation on a fly pattern called a double D that I found in a Fly Tire magazine. Main differences are the back legs are actually foam. Those foam legs can be a little bit difficult to cut. So we use rubber, which are, and the front legs on the original double D are rubber. So we just tied the legs in opposite, well, differently, I guess you should say, of what they did there. And then other than that, other than using a marker to put black dots on it, there really isn't much difference at all. The original that I saw did not use pearl cord. It used twine, 2 different colors of twine to create the body. So we just went with pearl cord because it's nice and glittery and holds shape well. And so when the fly sits, I'm sure some of you are like, well, how is this going to sit in the water? I'll show you real quick. Well, not upside down. There you go. Did a nosedive off there, landed upside down. So that's how it's going to sit in the water. It's just going to look like a grasshopper that's life is done. And so you're going to get lots of action in the film, and the foam is going to keep the rest of that fly up. So that's how it will sit for you on the water. Appreciate you joining us for week 4. Next week we're going to move on to a pattern I found called the Devil's Cricket. This is a really neat pattern. We're going to do some different things, add some antennas and just all kinds of fun stuff on this next one. It'll be, again, one of those flies that's going to be a little bit more tedious, as we're actually going to work the body a little bit and put some shape into it, all without using anything but thread for the most part. So you won't need any special cutters or anything like that. So that'll be the only fly for next week, because it's going to take a little bit like this one did. But other than that, I hope you've enjoyed yourself so far. Make sure you drop a comment below. We'll see you for week 5. And as always, everybody, happy tying. Take care, and we'll see you next time.